Hello everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel of Uncle Dewey's Ghost Stories. I hope everyone has an exciting time listening to these ghost tales. Thank you all so much. Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel to support me. Now, let's dive into today's stories. This story was told to me by a young woman. She mentioned that she has always enjoyed listening to ghost stories, especially those on our channel and other similar ones. For her, it was purely entertainment, as she didn't truly believe in ghosts, until she experienced a spiritual event at her own house that changed her perspective. She realized that even if you don't believe in the spiritual world, some events may force you to reconsider. This incident happened during the second death anniversary of her grandfather. On that day, she, her mother, and her younger brother were preparing to leave their house to visit her grandmother's house for the ceremony. When they arrived, she noticed her grandmother bustling around the house, pouring cups of tea to place on the altar. She greeted her grandmother, but noticed something unusual. Her grandmother's face seemed somber, almost on the verge of tears. This was strange to her, because her grandmother was usually cheerful whenever they visited. This time, however, her grandmother looked deeply upset. Another peculiar detail was that her Uncle Nam had arrived at the house about 10 minutes before them. She went inside to prepare a plate of cakes to place on the altar. Just as she placed the plate down, her grandmother suddenly walked out from the back of the house and began crying uncontrollably, like a child. Everyone in the house rushed over to see what was wrong. It was shocking because her grandmother had never cried like this during previous death anniversaries. When everyone gathered around, her grandmother started speaking in a strange voice, repeatedly demanding, "Call Sin here. Bring Sin here immediately." Sin was the youngest uncle of her grandfather, and he hadn't arrived yet. However, Sin's daughter, Hung, had come earlier to help with the preparations. Hearing the commotion, Hung ran over. As soon as she arrived, her grandmother, now speaking in an eerie tone, addressed Hung, saying, "Hung, it's me, your great-grandmother." At that moment, everyone realized that the spirit of her great-grandmother, who had passed away 30 years ago, had possessed her grandmother. The great-grandmother expressed her anger towards Uncle Sin, who was responsible for maintaining her altar. She complained that Sin had renovated his house and moved her altar to an improper location, making it impossible for her spirit to enter the house. She was furious about this. The spirit then explained that every year during her death anniversary, she couldn't enter the house or partake in the offerings. Instead, she had to stand outside, watching her descendants eat and drink, while malevolent spirits took all the offerings meant for her. She also scolded Uncle Sin for neglecting her grave, which was covered in fallen leaves and debris. Hung explained that the grave was surrounded by 2 large eucalyptus trees, which made it difficult to keep clean. The narrator witnessed everything firsthand. Despite being overwhelmed with emotion, her grandmother, possessed by the great-grandmother, clearly explained why she couldn't enter the house and how she was deprived of food every year. It was heartbreaking to hear. Shortly after, Uncle Sin finally arrived. The great-grandmother, still speaking through her grandmother, sternly instructed him to fix his ways. She demanded that a proper altar be set up in the correct location and that a priest be invited to perform rituals to formally invite her spirit back. She warned him not to move the altar carelessly again, as it prevented her from entering the house. The great-grandmother also urged Uncle Sin to focus on his responsibilities and stop indulging in a reckless lifestyle. After his wife passed away, Uncle Sin had started a relationship with another woman, initially thinking she would help care for his children. However, this woman turned out to be selfish, spending money frivolously and plunging the family into debt. Since then, Uncle Sin had neglected his duties, including maintaining the family altar, which angered the great-grandmother. She revealed that their family had been experiencing misfortunes because of spiritual disturbances caused by neglecting ancestral worship. If Uncle Sin didn't change his ways, perform the necessary rituals, and live responsibly, the family would face even greater calamities. After delivering this message, the great-grandmother's spirit departed, leaving everyone in the house shaken. Upon hearing the advice from the late great-grandmother, Mr. Oot felt it was very reasonable and became extremely frightened. He continuously pleaded and apologized to her, hoping she wouldn't hold any grudges or remain upset, even though she had passed away a long time ago. It seemed that the years of enduring pain made her angry. The great-grandmother said, "I won't return to that house anymore. This time, I'm leaving for good." Everyone in the house who witnessed the scene and heard her spirit speak was heartbroken. At this moment, Mrs. Chin, who was the in-law of your paternal grandmother, spoke to the great-grandmother. "Well, if you don't want to stay in Oot's house anymore, then each year you can come to my sixth daughter-in-law's house instead." The sixth daughter-in-law of the great-grandmother was actually your paternal grandmother, the one the great-grandmother's spirit had possessed. The great-grandmother's spirit responded, "The reason I came here this year is that I remember when my son Tan passed away." At this point, your Uncle Nam spoke up. "I believe nothing happens without a reason. Every incident carries a sign." Uncle Nam then recounted that the night before the Memorial Day, he had a dream about the great-grandmother. In his dream, he saw her standing in front of the house, accompanied by many children. Initially, he couldn't see clearly, but upon closer inspection, he realized these children were those from the family lineage who had died young. They had all gathered there, and the great-grandmother was standing at the entrance. Uncle Nam asked her, "Where are you going?" The great-grandmother replied, "I'm bringing these children to attend your father's memorial." The dream passed, and Uncle Nam continued to sleep. The following morning, he prepared to go to your grandmother's house for the memorial. However, while taking out his vehicle, he forgot to pray and invite the great-grandmother's spirit to join the memorial, which was a family tradition. Halfway through his journey, he suddenly remembered his oversight. He stopped the vehicle, prayed, and invited the great-grandmother to join the memorial. After doing so, he noticed that the vehicle felt heavier, as if someone had boarded it. Uncle Nam realized the great-grandmother had followed him to the memorial. Coincidentally, as soon as Uncle Nam arrived at your grandmother's house, he saw her slowly being possessed by the great-grandmother's spirit, who then began speaking. After hearing Uncle Nam's story, your Aunt Oot also shared her observations. She mentioned that before Uncle Nam arrived, she had seen your grandmother go to the back of the house to pour herself a drink. Aunt Oot asked, "Mom, how many dishes are on the table?" But your grandmother didn't reply, standing there with a sorrowful expression. It was evident that the great-grandmother's spirit had taken over her earlier, but seemed melancholy and speechless. After that memorial, Mr. Oot returned home and made significant changes to his life. He adjusted the family altar and even sought the help of a spiritual master to invite the great-grandmother's spirit to reside peacefully. It's unclear whether the great-grandmother attended subsequent memorials, but that particular event left a deep impression. Although it wasn't a frightening story, it evoked great sympathy for the great-grandmother, who had passed away more than 20 years ago yet hadn't been reincarnated. This story further reinforced your belief in the spiritual world. You felt compelled to trust such occurrences because your grandmother, as the great-grandmother's daughter-in-law, had no reason to fabricate such events. Moreover, the alignment of Uncle Nam's dream with the great-grandmother possessing your grandmother was too coincidental to dismiss. Now, moving on to the second story, this was recounted by a friend. The friend mentioned that their father primarily worked as a farmer, growing rice and crops. Their family lived in the Mekong Delta, where most of the farming was done on their own land. However, the father often leased additional plots from others to expand cultivation. One year, the father listened to his friend's advice. They suggested he explore the border area near Cambodia, as there were lands available for lease there. The land was inexpensive and the owners were lenient, allowing tenants to grow whatever they wanted. Intrigued by the idea, the father decided to visit the border region the next day to find suitable land for farming. Upon arriving, he searched for land and eventually found a plot that seemed perfect. He contacted the landowner, who lived nearby, and after some negotiation, the owner guided him to inspect the plot in detail. The land was beautiful, situated right next to a large canal, making it ideal for irrigation. For many years, the owner of this field has not done anything with this piece of land because it showed signs of being unsuitable for planting crops. After some time, your father noticed the neighboring plot of land appeared to have been recently dug up and disturbed, with the soil completely overturned. Curious, your father asked the owner, "Why don't you plant anything on this land? And why does the neighboring plot look like it's been dug up recently?" The owner hesitated before explaining. Yes, the neighboring plot was recently dug up because there were some old graves there. I don't know whose graves they were, but in recent days, people came and exhumed the remains. Now, there are no graves left. As for my land, it's true I haven't worked on it for a long time because I've been busy, but you can rent it and start planting. This field was originally cleared by me, so I own it now. You don't need to worry about ownership issues. Reassured by the owner's words and seeing the land's good location, your father decided to rent it for farming. However, the land required a lot of work, plowing and preparing the soil before planting. Additionally, the field was quite far from the village, making it inconvenient to visit. Your father decided only to visit during the day, leaving early in the morning and returning home by afternoon, avoiding staying overnight. For a long time, nothing unusual happened while farming the land. However, on the day of the rice harvest, your father and your Uncle Bay spent the entire day cutting rice and hiring workers to help. The harvested rice was threshed and packed into sacks, which were left in the field overnight, waiting for buyers to collect them the next day. To prevent theft, your father and Uncle Bay decided to stay overnight in the field to guard the sacks of rice. That night, as they set up their mosquito nets and prepared to sleep, they noticed other farmers staying in nearby fields to guard their harvests as well. Everything seemed normal until your father noticed the other farmers acting strangely, staring at him with cautious and uneasy expressions. When your father asked what was wrong, one of them finally shared a story, warning him not to let the landowner, Mr. Sow, know they had told him. They explained, "This land has a strange history. In the past, a few people rented it to grow rice, but most of them returned it after just 1 or 2 seasons. Some even returned it the day after renting it, refusing to explain why. We've heard that a long time ago, a family of 6 came here to settle and build a small house. One day, their house caught fire, and all 6 family members tragically died in the flames. Since no one knew where their relatives were, the villagers buried them right here on this land. Later, Mr. Sow came and cleared the land, claiming ownership. Although the graves were eventually exhumed, people who rent this land often experience strange and unsettling events." Hearing this, your father felt a chill run down his spine. Although he had never encountered anything supernatural on the land, he admitted feeling uneasy every time he visited, with goosebumps rising as soon as he arrived. While they were discussing this eerie history, a sudden, terrified scream startled everyone. It was Uncle Bay shouting for help from a distance. Rushing over, they found Uncle Bay had fallen into a pit that had been used for burial after the graves were exhumed. He was stuck at the bottom, covered in sticky, muddy soil. Everyone was frightened, but managed to pull him out after much effort. Once he was safe, they noticed his mouth was filled with mud, and he appeared shaken. After calming down, Uncle Bay recounted what had happened. He explained that while your father was talking to the other farmers, he had been lying in the mosquito net, scrolling on his phone. Suddenly, a man appeared outside the net and asked casually, "Hey, want to eat sweet potatoes? Come on, let's eat sweet potatoes together." The man's voice sounded normal, not scary or threatening. So Uncle Bay assumed it was one of the nearby farmers and followed him. However, as soon as he stepped out, he lost his footing and fell into the pit. All right, so there was nothing to be scared of. That's why Uncle Bay stepped out of the mosquito net and stood outside to receive the sweet potato from the man. But because it was so dark outside, he couldn't clearly see the man's face. He only heard the man say something. "Hey, is this your first time sleeping here? If I see you sleeping here again tomorrow, you're dead meat." After saying that, The man turned his back and walked off into the empty field, vanishing without a trace. Uncle Bay found it strange and thought, why did he invite me to eat sweet potato earlier? And now he's talking like this? What's going on? Feeling uneasy, Uncle Bay went back inside the mosquito net, grabbed a flashlight, and inspected the sweet potato. Upon closer look, it wasn't a sweet potato at all. It was a clump of dirt. Realizing what had happened, he quickly tossed the dirt aside and ran off in the direction of the hut where your father was sitting. He shouted for help, but no matter how far he ran, he couldn't seem to reach the hut. After running just a few steps, he fell into a hole. Uncle Bay later recounted to everyone. The hole wasn't even that deep, but I felt like something, hands from below, were grabbing my legs, preventing me from climbing out. That's why I kept shouting for help. Hearing this story, everyone was terrified, especially your father, who didn't dare to sleep there that night. He decided to pack up and return home, abandoning the rice field. The next morning, your father contacted the landowner to get to the bottom of the matter. When he met the landowner, he narrated the events of the previous night and asked directly, "Be honest with me. Is there something wrong with this land? I've heard rumors." At this point, Mr. Sow, the landowner, confessed, "This land is haunted by the spirit of a man. It keeps bothering me. I don't want to abandon it, so I rent it out cheaply. But whoever rents it ends up being disturbed too. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you wouldn't rent it." Although your father was angry, there wasn't much he could do since the damage was already done. He advised the landowner, "You should consult a spiritual master to deal with this spirit so you can have peace of mind and continue farming." After some discussion, Mr. Sow agreed and decided to invite a skilled spiritual master the next day. Following the advice of the villagers, Mr. Sow found a reputable spiritual master. The master arrived at the land with one of his disciples and set up an altar for the ritual. After chanting incantations, the male spirit possessed the master's disciple and began crying bitterly. The spirit revealed, "I am the soul of the husband in a family of 6 who perished in a fire. My wife and children's remains were properly collected and buried, but mine were not. My body is still here, buried under this land. When the villagers buried us, they mistakenly buried me near the grave of another man who had died long ago. His spirit has become a demon because his remains were taken and worshipped by my family, while I was left behind. This demon now resides on my family's altar and prevents me from returning to inform them of my plight. My family unknowingly worships him, while I remain trapped here." Hearing the spirit's sorrowful story, the master felt great pity. He asked the spirit for details about his hometown, name, and family so they could help. The spirit provided the information, and the master instructed Mr. Sow to visit the family the next day, explain the situation, and bring them to recover the remains. The following day, Mr. Sow went to the spirit's hometown, shared the story with the family, and brought them to the land. Under the master's guidance, they dug at the exact spot where Uncle Bay had fallen into the hole. Sure enough, they found a skeleton, the remains of the man from the family of 6 who had died in the fire. The family took the remains back home for proper burial and worship. As for the remains of the demon, the master instructed the family to exhume them, cremate them, and give them to him for safekeeping. The master planned to take the remains to a temple for chanting and prayers, helping the demon spirit move on. After resolving everything, the master assured your father, "The land is now free of any disturbances. You can continue farming here without worry." Trusting the master's words, your father resumed renting the land, and indeed, no further incidents occurred. Season of good harvests, huh? Every year, there's always a good season. The harvests are even better than the plots of land owned by your dad back home. That's why, after a few years, every year, your dad always had a good harvest. Then, your dad expressed a desire to buy that piece of land from Mr. Sow. However, Mr. Sow didn't agree to sell it. So, in the following years, your dad continued farming on that piece of land. And even though Mr. Sow didn't sell it, he charged a very cheap rental price. Dirt cheap, really. It was as if that piece of land became a shared property between the 2 men. One rented it, but didn't want to buy, and the other rented it out but didn't want to sell. The next part of the story is about a young woman who recounted this to Duwei. Back when she was still living in Kindo, before moving out to live with her boyfriend, she had a dream. In that dream, she found herself standing in front of a funeral. It was the funeral of an old woman, and she could clearly see the woman's face. The dream only showed her that scene, and she thought it was just a normal dream. The next morning, while her boyfriend was driving her to school, they passed by a real funeral. The scene was exactly the same as the one in her dream. Every detail matched perfectly. She looked at the portrait of the deceased, which was of an old woman, but because they were on the street, she couldn't clearly see the details of the photo. Shocked, she tapped her boyfriend and pointed at the funeral, recounting her dream from the night before. Both of them passed by the funeral and continued on their way. That night, when she went to sleep, she had another dream. In this dream, she saw an old woman standing at the door of her room. The woman was dressed like a maid from Korean dramas. As soon as the woman appeared, the young woman felt her body freeze. She couldn't move or scream. She watched as the old woman slowly walked to her right and passed straight through the mosquito net without lifting it. Startled, the young woman saw the old woman raise her hand and slap her hard across the face. The old woman then said, "How dare you point at my place? How dare you?" At that moment, in her subconscious, the young woman wanted to fight back. She had experienced similar dreams of encountering ghosts before. This time, in her dream, she grabbed the old woman's hand. It was icy cold. She shouted at the ghost, "If you dare do anything to me, I'll hit you so hard you won't even reincarnate." After she said that, the old woman backed away and disappeared. At that moment, the young woman screamed loudly, shouting, "Ghost!" Her scream woke her boyfriend, who was startled and asked her what had happened. Too scared, she didn't dare tell him until the following afternoon. When she finally recounted the story, she was still terrified, vividly remembering the image of the old woman. She realized it was her fault for pointing directly at the funeral and the casket. From then on, whenever she passed by a funeral, she never dared to look directly or point at anything. Instead, she would silently pray for the deceased to rest in peace. Through this story, she wanted to remind everyone, if you happen to pass by a funeral, avoid staring, pointing, or gossiping about it. At the very least, say a prayer or chant for the deceased to find peace. Even if they are strangers, it's a small but meaningful gesture. And with that, today's story comes to an end. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Dewey's YouTube channel for more stories. If you enjoyed this one, feel free to leave a comment below for others to read. Now, let's look forward to more great stories in the future. Goodbye, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel of Duwei Ghost Stories. Wishing you all a thrilling time listening to ghost stories. Before diving into the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to support Duwei. Thank you all so much. Now, let's begin with today's first story. This is quite a terrifying tale about an old school. Duwei will keep the name of the school anonymous. This school was a secondary school, and back then, everything seemed normal. However, after a shocking incident occurred, you began to hear stories from the local elderly people. They said that before the school was built, the land it stood on was very peculiar. It used to be a burial ground with many unmarked graves, graves of unknown people, abandoned and forgotten. Over time, these graves were exhumed and relocated, but it was said that during the process, some graves were accidentally left behind, buried under the soil. To meet the construction deadline, the builders ignored these graves and went ahead to lay the foundation and build the school. This was the cause of the strange happenings that Duwei is about to share. Ever since the school was constructed, it's unclear if previous students experienced anything strange, but when you enrolled, odd things started happening. Items would frequently go missing, textbooks, notebooks, and personal belongings would disappear from a classroom. It wasn't just your class. Other classes, even senior students' classes, faced the same issue. Everyone in the school began to suspect theft, so the students suggested pooling money to install cameras to catch the culprit. The teachers agreed because they too had heard about these thefts but couldn't identify who was responsible. Eventually, cameras were installed in every classroom, in the hallways, and even under the stairs. The school provided class monitors with a link to access the camera footage on their phones at any time. After the cameras were set up, things seemed normal. Students only checked the footage occasionally when they weren't at school, just to see if anyone was sneaking into the classrooms. One Saturday evening after class, Ton, the class monitor, invited some classmates to his house for his birthday party. The group had fun celebrating from 7 p.m. until around 8 or 9 p.m. when a few friends left, leaving about 7 or 8 people still at Ton's house. They played games like hide-and-seek and tag until around 11 p.m. At this point, it started raining heavily, and Ton's parents suggested that the group stay overnight since it was too dangerous to go home in the rain. Everyone agreed and decided to spend the night at Ton's house. It was late, but the group wasn't ready to sleep yet. They gathered in Ton's room, chatting and joking around. One of the friends, Vi, suggested an idea. Why not open the laptop and check the classroom cameras to see if anyone was sneaking in to steal things? The group found this idea intriguing and agreed. Ton opened his laptop, entered the camera link, and they began viewing the live footage of their classroom and the hallway outside. At first, nothing unusual appeared, so they turned off the lights and decided to sleep, leaving the laptop screen on. Around 1 a.m., the group was startled awake by a loud scream coming from the laptop. The laptop, positioned directly opposite the bed, was still running the camera footage. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the laptop screen. Everyone was scared but too afraid to approach the laptop. Only Ton, the class monitor, mustered the courage to check what was happening. He rewound the footage to around 12:01 a.m. and noticed something chilling, a dark figure moving around inside the classroom. Upon closer inspection, they saw a doll lying at the figure's feet. The camera quality wasn't great, so the details were unclear, but they could make out the shape of a doll. The dark figure eventually disappeared, and moments later, a white figure appeared, a woman. The white figure moved around the classroom, picked up the doll, and held it up to the camera. This allowed the group to see the doll more clearly. It had no arms, only one leg, no hair, and its face was scribbled with disturbing markings. The sight was horrifying. The group was frozen in fear as they continued watching the footage. For the first time, they witnessed a ghostly apparition captured so vividly on camera. The experience left them terrified, as they had never believed such things could be recorded so clearly. A few minutes later, they saw the white shadow along with the black shadow moving in circles around the classroom. At this point, the doll had already been put down and wasn't being held anymore. After about 2 minutes, the white shadow approached the camera, bringing its face very close. At that moment, they clearly saw 2 very long fangs on the upper jaw, a very old-looking face, pale and bloodied. The most striking feature was its mouth. It was torn as if someone had slashed it with a knife. The face appeared for about a second before the camera abruptly shut off. Everyone panicked, closed the laptop, and, terrified, ran to Hung's room, Tana's mother, to tell her what had happened. She advised them to immediately turn off the laptop, place a 7-layer mat at the front of the house, and sleep outside, avoiding the room entirely. That night, none of them dared to sleep. They stayed awake until morning. The next day, their parents were called to bring them home. By the start of the school week, they were still haunted by the images from the camera over the weekend. When they arrived at school and climbed the stairs to their classroom, they noticed several bloodstains on the stairs. The stains looked like dry blood from an accident. As they climbed, a strong metallic smell of fresh blood hit their noses, making them feel even more frightened. They decided to wait for their homeroom teacher to arrive and planned to tell her about the events of the previous night and the bloodstains on the stairs. Before they could speak to the teacher, the group entered the classroom and noticed the blackboard. It was covered with deep scratches, as if someone had used sharp objects to claw at it, leaving long, deep marks. While they were discussing these scratches, a girl named Nan, sitting at the front near the teacher's desk, screamed. She had noticed the leg of a doll under the teacher's desk. The leg was large and covered in a dark red substance resembling blood. The smell was overwhelming and nauseating. The class gathered around to look, and sure enough, the doll's leg reeked despite being made of plastic. They called the janitor and the discipline teacher, who came to remove the doll's leg. The homeroom teacher arrived, and the group told her everything they had experienced the previous night, including the footage from the laptop. The teacher seemed shocked but didn't say much. After teaching her 2 literature periods, she went to the principal's office during recess. While she was gone, the group decided to use the restroom. Their school had 2 restrooms, one at the end of the hallway and another behind the classroom block, which was rarely used. For some reason, they chose the restroom at the back. However, as soon as they reached the entrance, they were hit by the same metallic smell from earlier. They looked around to see if something had died, but found nothing. Then, they noticed a doll's head hanging from the restroom door. Terrified, they ran to the security guard's office and asked him to come and check. The guard, along with the PE teacher, went to inspect and confirm the doll's head was there. The principal also arrived, having been informed of the situation. He instructed all students to return to class and continue their lessons as usual. However, at the end of the day, the teachers were still gathered around the back restroom. The next day, the security guard revealed to the group that the school had invited a spiritual master to inspect the area. The master explained that the land beneath the school had been a burial ground before construction, and while many graves had been exhumed, some remained buried under the school. The master placed protective talismans on the back restroom door. The group thought the issue had been resolved, but during the afternoon classes, 3 senior students fainted in the back restroom. When taken to the nurse's office, they explained that they had seen a girl without arms or legs, her body bloodied, peeking into the restroom. That same day, the homeroom teacher announced that classes would be canceled the following day for maintenance work. Although no details were given, it was obvious the back restroom was being addressed. When classes resumed, the security guard told the group that the school had brought the spiritual master back. The master discovered that most of the graves were concentrated beneath the back restroom. He advised the school to demolish it. The restroom, which was already old and in need of repairs, was completely torn down. Upon excavation, several graves were found underneath. The school spent money to properly handle the situation, to exhume someone's remains and reinter them in another location. As the security guard recounted, on that day, while the sun was shining brightly during the excavation, the weather suddenly shifted, and it began to rain heavily. The sky turned pitch black. After the exhumation was completed, the school decided to rebuild the restroom right on that spot instead of cordoning it off. Later, after consulting a spiritual master to restore the restroom, students in subsequent years no longer experienced any strange occurrences. The second story is about the experience of a man during his time in Trang Dai, Dong Nai, which Duy had mentioned a long time ago. However, today's story is not about his military days, but rather his journey traveling across Vietnam. This man had a passion for traveling, especially riding through provinces. In 2016, he traveled from Sapa to Hanoi, then took a train from Hanoi to Saigon. From Saigon, he continued exploring provinces in the Mekong Delta. He mentioned that people often associate supernatural occurrences with places like Dalat, but he found that such phenomena exist everywhere. Surprisingly, he believed the Mekong Delta had some of the most peculiar experiences, which he had not expected. During one of his trips to the Mekong Delta, he stayed at the house of a family he had previously worked with on a reality television program. This time, he visited Gia Rai Bac Lu and stayed at the home of an individual who preferred to remain anonymous. Upon arrival, he learned that the man's wife had passed away in a traffic accident, leaving him to live with his 2 children. That night, after arriving late, the host prepared dinner and the 2 shared drink. In the Mekong Delta, drinking is customary, but since the traveler was not accustomed to it, he only had a few sips before feeling tipsy. During their conversation, the host mentioned, "Lately, she's been causing trouble. The kids can't sleep." The traveler initially thought the she referred to a creditor causing the host stress. He reassured the host and suggested discussing any issues. After the meal, the host prepared a room for the traveler, while he went to sleep with his children in another room. Before sleeping, the traveler received a phone call requesting details about his parents for tax exemption purposes. He provided their names and some other information. After the call, he lay down to sleep, but suddenly craved mung bean and lotus seed sweet soup. While lying near the window, with his back to it and his face toward the door, he began to doze off. In his half-asleep state, he felt someone staring at him. Being sensitive to supernatural encounters, he immediately sensed something unusual. Opening his eyes, he looked toward the door but saw no one. However, he heard a rustling sound outside the window, as if someone was brushing against the grass. Moments later, he heard a faint, familiar voice, a woman calling softly, "Not, wake up and eat the lotus seed sweet soup. Wake up, my child." The voice sounded exactly like his mother's. Alarmed, he remained still, pretending to sleep. The voice continued, "Not, why don't you eat the sweet soup I made? It's me, Jungti du, Zomota. I made it for you." He was shocked at how the entity knew his mother's full name, realizing he had mentioned it during the earlier phone call. Goosebumps covered his body as he resisted responding. Despite his fear, he felt compelled to turn toward the window. When he opened his eyes, he saw a clear image of his mother's face outside. However, her face was unnaturally pale, almost white as chalk. She wore a traditional, shiny albabier outfit. What kind of dessert pod is this, standing so close to the window, sticking your face in as if you're about to push your head through the window frame? Then, this person spoke with a voice exactly like my mom's. She said, "Not, stick your head out here. Mom will feed you." At that moment, it felt like I was paralyzed. That person wasn't there anymore. They had disappeared without a trace. I couldn't move at all, no matter how hard I tried. I kept chanting prayers for 2 to 3 minutes straight. Then, I heard the neighbor's dog barking furiously outside the window. After a while, I saw the light in the next room turn on. My uncle came into my room, sat down, and shook me awake. When I sat up, tears were streaming down my face, and I didn't even realize it. My uncle said, "I saw the dog barking like crazy, so I knew she was back. She's been scaring the kids for the past few days. They can't sleep. Earlier, I wanted to tell you to close the window before sleeping, but I got too drunk and forgot. Indeed, my room had a window, but I didn't close it. That night, I was so scared that I didn't dare sleep in my room anymore." My uncle also couldn't sleep, so we both stayed awake until 4 a.m. My uncle explained that she had died unjustly, hit by a car. The day she died was during a spiritually significant time, so she became a ghost and refused to reincarnate. Recently, she's been coming back, causing trouble, and trying to take someone with her. My uncle admitted he wanted to tell me earlier, but didn't because he was afraid I'd get scared. I thought that person was just a creditor or a neighbor of his. Through this story, I want to advise everyone to avoid calling each other's full names, especially when traveling far. Spirits are very sensitive. They can understand what we're thinking. They often mimic the voices or appearances of our loved ones to lure us. This reminds me of another story during a work trip for a reality TV show. My team was surveying underprivileged areas from Saigon to Bin Din. We were filming these situations for the show. Nothing unusual happened until we reached Phu Yen. There, we filmed the boy who had to go to the fields at night to catch snails. I asked for permission to film him doing this. It was my first time stepping into the field, so I was nervous about falling. I handed my phone to the production assistant on the bank to hold for me. However, after stepping into the mud, I realized it wasn't as hard as I thought. So, I took my iPhone back and decided to film the scene myself because I felt the iPhone camera was better for night shots than the professional camera. While filming the boy catching snails under the bright moonlight, I suddenly felt as if someone was watching me from afar. I've experienced ghostly encounters before, so I could sense something was off. I instinctively looked towards a row of palm trees. The moonlight illuminated the palm fronds, casting shadows on the ground. That's when I saw a woman in a gray floral outfit standing under one of the palm trees. She wasn't facing me, but looking in the opposite direction, her back turned. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what I was seeing. I quickly finished filming and decided to leave. Later that night, I returned to the hotel. The production assistant, being a local, decided to stay at home to do laundry and sleep there. So, I was alone in the hotel room. After a long day, I was exhausted and fell into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, I sent someone in the room. It was a woman wearing the same gray floral outfit I had seen earlier under the palm tree. Her outfit was made of crumpled fabric. She sat on the edge of my bed, her head swaying side to side as if doing something. After a while, she stood up, walked to the door, and stared at it. Then, she walked backward and sat back on the bed. Despite knowing I was being haunted, I was too tired to react and continued sleeping. She didn't harm me. It felt like she just wanted to make her presence known. Before sleeping, I had placed my phone on the bedside table. But when I woke up, it was at the foot of the bed. I checked the phone to review the footage I had filmed of the boy earlier. While browsing through the gallery, I found 3 black photos among the clips. These photos seemed to have been accidentally taken. I didn't remember taking them, but they might have been captured when I was washing my feet. This story, well, I'm not saying whether it's scary or not, because it depends on everyone's perspective and belief. Some might believe it, some might not. It's entirely up to you. For me, every time I experience something related to the spiritual world, it feels very strange. I don't even know why it happens like that. It's so bizarre. Like that morning when I turned on my phone and opened a photo for the first time, I felt a sensation like an electric current running down my spine, spreading throughout my body. My skin crawled, and the hairs on my neck stood up. It was terrifying. The next story. Do you think listening to ghost stories could make you encounter spirits? This story was shared by a girl who wanted to tell her experience so others could understand more about the spiritual world. This girl is actually very brave. She's been hospitalized many times but never saw anything unusual, even though people often say hospitals are haunted. She didn't experience anything, even when she stayed deep in cemeteries to ask for lottery numbers. Although she believes in the spiritual world, she was never frightened. That is, until one time when she stayed at the Tropical Diseases Hospital. I won't specify the province it's located in, but this time was so terrifying it left a lasting impression on her. Despite her illness not being severe, she kept her usual habit of watching ghost stories or clips about spirits before bed. That night, while scrolling through her phone, she received a YouTube notification from a channel she had subscribed to. The channel had just uploaded a video titled 5 Ghostly Encounters Caught on Camera in Hospitals. Seeing the title, she was intrigued and wanted to watch it. However, it was almost midnight, and she hesitated, thinking it wasn't a good idea to watch such things at this hour, especially in a hospital. But curiosity got the better of her, and she hit play. It was nearly midnight, just a minute or two away. Her husband scolded her, telling her to turn off the phone and watch it in the morning instead, as midnight is considered an inauspicious time. But she dismissed him, saying, "You sleep first. I'll watch and then sleep. It doesn't concern you." That decision to watch the video at midnight haunted her ever since. After finishing the video, it was already midnight. Her husband and everyone else in the room were asleep, leaving her the only one awake. Suddenly, she heard a chilling laugh, a loud, maniacal laugh that echoed continuously. It sounded as if it came from the end of the hallway. The sound sent shivers down her spine. Scared, she pulled the blanket over her head, but she couldn't sleep. She kept waking up, startled, 3 or 4 times throughout the night. Finally, when she managed to fall asleep, she had a strange dream. She felt as though her spirit had left her body. In the dream, she stood outside her bed, watching herself lying under the blanket. Then, she saw many people with terrifying faces approaching her bed, pulling her blanket off and yelling at her angrily. Their voices were so loud and intense that her ears hurt. In the dream, she noticed her body lying on the bed, with her hand pointing toward the door. Outside the door, she saw 3 incense sticks burning. The scene was chaotic, and she couldn't describe it all. She screamed and woke up, finding it was already 7 a.m. Her body was drenched in sweat, and her clothes were soaked. She recounted everything to her husband and the others in the room. Her husband scolded her for being stubborn, reminding her that he had warned her not to watch such videos. She realized she had brought garlic with her for protection, but had only placed it under her husband's pillow and her roommate's pillow. She forgot to put any under her own pillow, leaving it in her jacket pocket. That might have been why she experienced such a terrifying night. She spent the entire day in fear, worried about whether the spirits would return that night. Later, she heard from others that there was a small shrine dedicated to the goddess of mercy behind the hospital. They advised her to go there, pray, and apologize to the spirits. At 4 p.m. that day, she went to the shrine, prayed for peace, and apologized to the spirits for watching such videos at night. That night, she slept peacefully and didn't encounter anything unusual again. Although she had apologized and nothing else happened, it's worth noting that she hadn't done anything to provoke the spirits. She was just curious and liked watching ghostly videos. These videos and stories often teach meaningful lessons about the spiritual world. However, it's important to choose appropriate times and places to engage with such content, avoiding sensitive locations like hospitals. And with that,